Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. You can donate to this mission at restoringdarkness.com. And I'm with my co host today, Mark Baker at softlights.org. You can check out his work there at softlights.org. Mark, you sent me an email where you had contacted all the representatives of the House. That would be the Congress of the United States, correct?
House Energy and Commerce Committee, I
Oh,
believe.
committee.
One committee.
Right. And you were discussing the manner in which LED lights produce light, and you're taking issue with light emitting diodes as such, correct?
Correct.
So there's a big bolded thing in your email here says that the source of light should radiate outwards, not focus inwards. What the heck do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a big deal to come up on that language. We've been searching for that language for several years. How to easily convey to the public what's the difference between our traditional and natural light sources and LEDs. So I was reading a paper from the Department of Energy, I think it was 2009, and they had some very sort of astonishing quotes in there. They said that LEDs are a radically new technology. They said that the LED light is directional and has unique characteristics. So I was like, well, what does that mean? So I wanted to unpack that. And so as we thought about it, and I shared with others, the concept is that, well, LEDs are directional. And if you think of like on a theater stage, they use directional lighting like a spotlight to highlight some character that's on the stage, so that you now focus your attention on that character that's under the spotlight and everybody else sort of fades away. You can barely see those people. That's
Yeah,
what
so by
directional
creating
lighting.
a contrast between the light level in the audience and the light on the stage, they focus your attention in that direction.
Right. And so when the Department of Energy says that LEDs are a directional light, they mean that it's a spotlight. Um, so I started to run with that idea that, oh my gosh, is that really how we should be illuminating our living rooms, illuminating our streets, is with a spotlight? So one of our members posted this. Yeah, all light should radiate outward, not focus inward. And I said, oh my gosh, that's so good. It's so clear. It divides the type of light. LEDs are not just a problem with a spectral power distribution. LEDs are just a fundamentally different type of light where I've been using the inverse square law a lot, but people kind of argue with me. Oh, everything follows the inverse square law. No, actually, a traditional light source will radiate outward. The light does disperse following an inverse square law, gets gentler and gentler, less and less intense. LEDs are the exact opposite. LEDs gets focused, it's very intense. There's some distribution, there's some sort of beam width, but it's a focused light. And are we designed as human beings, moths, butterflies, frogs, etc., to absorb this very intense focused light? And I would say no. So it's a big deal to sort of alert members of Congress and the public that this Department of Energy initiative to switch us, the whole world ended up switching, to switch us to a directed energy focused light.
The I often call it pressure, what you're talking about, where
Yeah.
there seems to be a pressure. Now, wouldn't this be mitigated if, for example, you took a light fixture and you inverted the LEDs in the fixture so they shined up onto a reflective surface and out? Wouldn't you create the same energy as an incandescent or a HID lighting source in that regard, because the light is then mixed off a reflector and sent out rather than the LED chip being pushed directly out?
There would be some mitigation. It would be better, right? But your starting point is not a good starting point. You are starting with this very intense light that's closer to a laser. You and I have talked about that, right? It feels
Mm.
this really intense light. And then you're trying to let's talk about the laser. You're trying to then disperse this laser. Can be done, sure. You can bounce it off the walls. It becomes less intense, but it wasn't a good starting point to begin with. So maybe it's a mitigation, but why not just start with the proper source? If your goal is to illuminate a room, then start with a light that radiates outward. That would be the correct. If they made LEDs in little spheres, and maybe this is technically possible in some day, then it would be perfectly fine. But if you're going to start with a flat source and it's going to focus this light as a beam and then try to mitigate it afterwards, it's just the whole thing's messed up.
The um, from my perspective, I see the issue with LEDs fundamentally being if one can see the array, what you see is glare, and glare is not good. Um,
Correct.
I think you sound like, if we went back to 1920 and you were screaming about horse and carriages, everyone's buying a car and saying, we should go with that Tesla guy and make electric engines. We should go with that Tesla guy and make electric engines because we're going to pollute the world with all this gasoline burning from fossil fuels. But I'm going to tell you the likelihood of this ship turning around now with LEDs is very low. It's almost impossible. Our source of electric light for the foreseeable future in terms of decades is going to be LEDs. What should we do? What can we do, Mark? There's no way of going back.
Well, first, I would say, I understand your position, but I would say that it's not going backwards, it's going to what biological systems are designed for, going back to the proper source of lighting. This switch to LEDs was caused, it didn't accidentally happen. The United States Department of Energy started futzing around with this stuff at least as 2002. They had the assist program, they brought in the lighting industry, and they made this happen. In 2005, Congress directed the United States Department of Energy to explore white light as a replacement for incandescent light bulbs and fluorescent light bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
Now
And
think
HID
about amber,
sources. And HID sources
huh?
as well. HID sources as well.
But that's not what the law says, right? If you go look at the law, it was for incandescence and fluorescence. So when the Department of Energy started doing everything else, uh, like especially they started with streetlights, there was no directive from Congress for them to start replacing amber streetlights, high pressure sodiums, low pressure sodiums, with white light LEDs. This is something they just decided
But
to
I don't
do.
think that's a congressional decision. I think it's the decision of whoever owns the lights. But let me go back to my
But
question here. I think what we have to do, the only thing we can do, is to figure out a way to mitigate this using LEDs. I don't think there's another
well,
path.
so what we have to understand is the impacts of switching to this focused inward light, this tremendous switch from light that gently disperses to intense focused light. What's happened to our health? What about the people now that are suffering seizures and can't leave their house? We got to do something for these people. The flashing lights are super intense. The spectral distribution is another issue. The flicker is another issue. But the fact that the light starts off as a focused inward beam is fundamentally different. Like that's unsolvable, basically. And so
Well, you don't
it
know
got
that
to
it's
be.
unsolvable. You're just saying that the current trajectory is not a good outlook for you.
I used to be a computer programmer.
Hmm.
If the program was like kind of not based upon a fundamentally sound design, then you scratch it. You just toss the whole thing out and start over because it just, you could keep trying to patch it, but it's just sort of unstable the whole time. So throw it away and start over. And I've done that several times in my career. And then you just start with okay, let's get the foundation correct. So the foundation for illumination right now with LEDs is fundamentally wrong. It's the same as building a house. If you start the foundation with the concrete and stuff at the bottom and it's a little bit crooked, you're just always going to be fighting the foundation. So this is my recommendation is to understand, at least that's the starting point, understand that there was this switch, right, from light that radiates outward to light that focuses inward.
Explain the inward a little bit more before I tell you that your mission is impossible.
You could tell me, but so I understand the difficulty. Okay, so a traditional and a natural light source is I call it a point source. Other people have different names for it, but so the light radiates out, follows an inverse square law for energy dispersion. LEDs are flat. The light coming off the LEDs, because of the flat geometry, they start to overlap each other and they create a beam of light in the shape of a mathematical shape called a Lambertian. So in the center of the chip is going to be your most intense light, and then it's going to fall off following this Lambertian shape off to the edges where it's basically zero, right? There's no light basically at the edges. So that's a beam. So it's depending on maybe they put some other optics on top of it or other, I don't know. But in general, it's this beam, and then so it spreads out. It's not spreading out with an inverse square law. It's spreading out in some other thing. But by the time it reaches to its destination, it's the center is still very intense. So there are things like I don't know much about it, but there are things called waveguides you can insert and try to split that light out and try to get it to disperse gently again. Cree Lighting was the first to publish a paper that in this array of LEDs, you have this Lambertian and then no light. Lambertian, no light. Lambertian. And Cree Lighting calls that dangerous. That's in their paper, dangerous light. So why are we messing around with dangerous light? Let's fix this. Let's understand what the Department of Energy did, that they marketed this and pushed this, and they understood it from the beginning that it's a directional light. Let's not have spotlights everywhere we go. We don't want spotlights in our eyes. We want the gentle illumination. That's how
I
vision
don't
works.
think you have the vocabulary to describe this problem totally worked out. You know, in the past where you had a reflective light source, so light fixtures were built to contain reflectors in them so that the optical distribution of the light would go in the direction of wherever you wanted. And so what they would do is they'd put a candle in there, or the incandescent bulb, or an HID, or a halogen bulb. That filament or that source of light, fluorescent, would fluoresce, or the filament would burn. The light would emit in all directions, and some of it would go off the back of the reflective surfaces and kind of mix together and shoot out of the light fixture at the speed of light, right? So all this is happening. And so what you have is like a mixed band of light. And what you're saying is with LEDs, you have these beams of light that are coming out of the fixture. Even when they're optically dispersed, they still stratify into these beams. And the beam process is not eliminated at all. And that this is a source of health effects for people. Is that what you're saying? Health problems?
Yeah, so we know at least one person checked herself into a medical clinic, a well-known. They had a team of doctors. They brought in LED lights like car headlights and flashlights, and they brought in regular tungsten filament lights, regular incandescents. And with the incandescents, she was fine. With the LEDs, she suffered seizures, couldn't talk. So why is that exactly? I don't know. It could be a combination of spectral distribution, but this intensity is occurring with others. So we believe that it's like when you first get hit with an LED light, it is so intense that you may suffer some kind of a seizure. So it's about the intensity. If you soften it up, and it's all about degrees. If you soften things up, yeah, it's less likely to cause the harm. But we got to understand choosing a directional light source like LEDs is not appropriate for the process of illumination. A lot of people use the term not fit for purpose.
A lot of people are going to disagree with you, Mark Baker, but you can check out his work at softlights.org. He's definitely pushing the envelope in this world. I don't know anybody else that's actually coming on a recorded call to say that LEDs are bad and they're irrecoverable technology. In fact, we have to get rid of it all. I don't agree with Mark Baker on that, but I do believe he's making strong points in that we need to solve this problem, which I call pressure from glare of LEDs. So we'll continue to prosecute this on the Restoring Darkness podcast. You can go to softlights.org. You can go to restoringdarkness.com to support our work. Thank you for listening.